Hey, I'm 2 minutes late, and I apologize, but I was trying to get that damn name off of there. The Seth Payne, not the Bet US. Thanks to Bet US for sponsoring the video. Nick Caley had his whole whirlwind introductory press conference last week, and we went over that. But he was also on Texans radio with Mark Vandermeer and John Harris, and I want to react to a couple things he said there. Plus, I'm going to have some clips from Robert Mays, who has his athletic football show, and he said some very nice things about Nick Caley as well. I thought that this was one of the things I got most excited about from Texans radio was when asked if he ever thought about doing anything else with his life. This was Nick Caley's answer.
Have any thought to doing anything else with your life as you're growing up?
Zero.
It was coaching all the way.
I wanted to coach.
Are you sure you didn't want to work at Pro Football Focus for a couple of years? Because that's what one of our guys wanted to do. And I'm not here to bash on Bobby Slowik. I think that there's just some fundamental differences between the way Nick Caley's wired and the way that Bobby Slowik is wired. And not one is necessarily good or bad. It's just that for where Bobby Slowik is in his career right now, it wasn't right for the Houston Texans. And there were some issues fundamentally with the way the Texans operated that I get excited about Nick Caley, even though he hasn't proven anything as a play caller or an offensive coordinator or anything like that. I think there's a difference in football character, at least like football worldview, that I get excited about. I'm still very positive about the Texans. Over at Bet US, plus 1,200 for the Texans to win. They are heavy favorites to win the AFC South. I don't see the Texans taking a step back defensively, and I certainly see C.J. Stroud getting back more to his old self. You can get a 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit when you use the promo code YouTube150 over at BetUS. Now, when it comes to what people say about him. This is Robert Mays, real smart film watching type of guy. His podcast is great. He has a lot of good guests. He's got a Sean McVay interview that I want to watch probably later today. But this is Robert Mays talking about what it's like in a conversation with Nick Caley.
The energy is insane. Like when you leave a conversation with Nick, it's kind of like leaving a conversation with Sean McVay and what they're bringing to the discussion.
Yeah, and I think that energy keeps getting brought up over and over again. There was an article by Jonathan Alexander where he interviewed former Texans draft pick Dave Ragone, who's the quarterback's coach with the Rams. And Ragone talked about how he can hear him through the walls in the meeting and that he gets very amped up about what he's doing. That's good. And there's lots of high energy coaches who suck. It's not like that's the only thing you need. But in trying to take on the swarm mentality, I just feel like this is a guy who's cut from the same cloth as D'Amico. And when you try to have a culture, we had this discussion a lot on Payne and Pendergast, is, all right, who's swarm on this team? Who are the guys who are special work ethic and relentless mindset? For those who don't know, that's D'Amico Ryan's favorite acronym. And most of them are on defense. You got Joe Mixon on offense. You got C.J. Stroud. You've got Nico Collins, Tank Dell when he's healthy. And then it's few and far between the guys that you would say are swarmy. I think Cade Stover's got the potential to be swarmy. I think some of the young offensive linemen have the potential to be swarmy, but they just were not practicing the good and sound fundamentals that they need to get there. So when we come to the offensive line, I get excited about the fact that Nick Caley worked under Dante Scarnecchia or worked alongside Dante Scarnecchia in New England. Dante Scarnecchia, before Jeff Stoutland, was the guy who was the best offensive line coach in the league for a long, long time, and really a key to a lot of the success. The Patriots' ability to change up their game plan from week to week, it works a hell of a lot better when you've got offensive linemen who know what the hell they're doing and can execute at 100% speed, whether you're running outside zone or whether you're running duos or whatever it might be, the pass protection changing it up and everything. Like, that's all rooted in fundamentals there. Here is Nick Caley talking on Texans radio about his time under working alongside Dante Scarnecchia.
Yeah, he's meant a lot to me. He's a big mentor to me. He's always been supportive, and he mastered making some things that could be very complex, very simple and digestible for guys so that they can turn it loose, they can play fast, and they're rooted in fundamentals. Yeah. And that's what I take from him, and he has always been a great sounding board for not just me, for a lot of us that have crossed paths with him, but he's an exceptional coach and a lot of respect for him.
So, and that's a huge thing, taking something that's complex and making it simple. You've got to have rules that you follow, that you can execute at 100 miles per hour without having to think too much or without getting things overly complicated. And that's an issue that, going back to Bill O'Brien, I think Bill O'Brien's a really smart guy, but Bill O'Brien was more of a passing game guy. Bill O'Brien was more of a quarterbacks guy. And Bobby Slowik, more of a passing game guy. Come up with stuff that's awesome on the whiteboard, but then you start asking everybody else to execute in ways that are really, really hard to do. And sometimes those whiteboard guys don't really genuinely understand how hard it is to execute on the ground level. And I feel like at the very least, Nick Caley's got that ability. He understands it. Learning from Scarnecchia is great, but not everybody who studied under Socrates became Plato. Nobody remembers Matt Patricius of Cato or whoever back in the day. Crete, I don't know, somewhere in Greece. So it's cool that he had that environment. It's cool that he's worked under Sean McVay as well. But as we know, not everybody who worked under Bill Belichick became a really good offensive coordinator or head coach. Not everybody that's worked under Sean McVay has gone on to be a great coordinator or head coach, although his track record's pretty good compared to a lot of the other coaching trees that you look out there. So what is the Nick Caley offense?
What is the Nick Caley offense? What can you tell us today about the Nick Caley offense?
Yeah, tough, physical, getting the ball to our playmakers and being connected and playing smart football, not beating ourselves, taking care of the football, being disciplined, and competing for 4+ quarters, however long it takes us to get the job done.
Yeah, and again, okay, that's nothing groundbreaking or earth-shattering. I just think in the whole methodology, the way he operates, anytime he's asked about his philosophy on offense, it always comes back to the fundamentals, the execution, like all those things that we kept hearing about week after week after week. I think that at times, and there's a phrase here that he's going to use later that I get really excited about, just because it reminds me of something Tom Coughlin told me once, and he was a pretty good football coach. But there's a different worldview in that I think Kayley is very much about understanding and remembering and knowing that it does all start with technique. And that's one of the things I've always admired about the Patriots when they were the Patriots, that you could see guys get better as the season went along. That you would look at a position group. I was usually looking at the defensive line, and at the beginning of the season, I think these guys suck. Yeah, Patriots are screwed this year. And then you see them a few weeks later, and you're like, oh, that rookie 7th-round pick is actually playing with really good technique. He got better as the season went along. These offensive linemen are getting better as the season goes along. So that part of it, it feels better to me. It just in a way that I think I haven't really seen since back when Gary Kubiak was a guy that was, rooted in repetition, getting the technique right. It feels a little bit more like that. This is Robert Mays on the benefit of Kayley having worked with Sean McVay or under Sean McVay.
I think LA was good for him in his football education in a few different ways. Seeing a different way of doing it from the way that Belichick did it, I think, is big. I think seeing different types of leadership styles, coaching styles is very important.
Yeah, no, and that's really important. I got to address, I'm glad this jogged my memory. Caesar, or Cesar, however you pronounce it. Sounds like the Bill O'Brien scheme. Yes, yeah, and that, remember, Gary Kubiak got fired. Bill O'Brien came in. One of the criticisms of Kubiak was that he didn't adjust from week to week enough. Bill O'Brien came in, said we're a game plan offense. And yeah, game plan offense, game plan. And not, you got to have a better game plan than this. There's a little bit of that. Like, it feels a little bit like deja vu, which when it comes down to it, yes, a game plan offense is awesome as long as you've got people executing it and as long as you've got the right quarterback. And it took a few years for them to find the right quarterback, and then there's just a few things happened here and there, and then it was all kaput. We don't have to rehash all that. I feel like every guy that comes in here might want to say tough, smart, dependable, but somebody along the way in the PR department tells them, like, hey, listen, just tough, smart, and hell of a guy or something. Just don't say tough, smart, dependable. People are burned out on that. So as far as working under McVay, we go back to, all right, boy, All right, not everybody that comes out of New England ends up being a brilliant coach elsewhere. Yes, not everybody that comes out of any scheme anywhere ends up being a brilliant coach elsewhere. I think that one of the issues with a lot of Patriots guys on the coaching side of things is that those guys come out of New England, and they're trying to emulate everything about Bill Belichick. Like, okay, I'm going to work 18 hours a day. Check. All right, I'm going to consider myself a genius. Check. I'm going to treat people like dirt. Okay. That falls apart if you don't have that genius part hemmed up. So, like, there's that. One of the books that Nick Caserio actually recommended I read, there's an entire chapter in one of them about not making the mistake of trying to emulate every single thing about a person you admire. That every person has flaws, and with some great people, their strengths are just such that they get away with the flaws. Like because everybody's flawed. But the biggest mistake is to think, oh, I got to copy this guy, like be a carbon copy of this guy. And I think a lot of Patriots guys end up trying to do that. I think with the benefit of having a couple of years with Sean McVay is that Sean McVay's wired completely differently than Bill Belichick in a lot of ways. Apologies if I said Bill O'Brien in the last 2 minutes when I meant Bill Belichick. You guys know what I'm talking about. And I think Kayley, it was probably a good lesson for him to see and realize, like, all right, there's different ways to do it in the NFL. Both these guys have had success. I'm going to be me, and maybe there's parts of McVay's personality, which it sounds from other people that Kayley's personality is a little bit more McVay than Belichick, that it's okay to be your own guy and just bring the energy and bring your knowledge, and most of all, just teach guys fundamentals, teach guys to do things the proper way. This is on how he's evaluating last year's team. And I think John Harris, when he asked this question, kind of framed it that they've talked to some new coaches that say, I don't really want to know too much about last year. We're starting fresh. Other guys are going to watch a lot of film and try to learn as much about the team. That's my preferred approach. And it sounds like that's what Nick Caley's preferred approach is.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just getting a feel for the players, what their strengths are, what their play style is, and just, how, we view them in terms of moving forward as a staff and how we can use them, moving forward. Scheme, it changes, it evolves, even in continuous years with the same set of coaches and players, you'll evolve those things from year to year. I don't think anybody ever stays the same.
Right.
If you do that, you'll end up getting, you got to evolve.
Yeah, you got to evolve, which is, and somebody asked the name of the book. I will look it up here towards the end of it. And then I'll probably put an affiliate link in there. Just buy it. I'll get like 37 cents off of it. But it was a good book. The evolving from year to year, yes. And I think if there's one thing that Slowik didn't do a good enough job of this year, it's that he didn't somehow, this still boggles my mind, somehow Slowik, knowing that he had three really scary receivers when healthy on the field, it surprised him. He said it surprised him how much cover two they were seeing. And around the league, remember this year, that was a big talking point early on. Ban the cover two! And you guys have heard me rant enough about this. Like, beating cover two against most defenses is easy, unless you got a defense like the Eagles, who could play cover four or cover two and then stop the run with 6 or 7 guys in the box because they're studs. It's easy with a lot of teams if all they're going to show you is cover two. And the Texans looked completely lost and decrepit. But then from year to year, too, leaning into the strengths, I think I was being patient with Bobby this year because, hey, if you want to run an outside zone-based scheme, it does take a lot of reps. It takes a lot of work. But you got to keep at it and you got to get those reps in. The problem was they weren't being coached properly or schemed up properly to really get the benefit of it. And I think that, as we've heard from Kayley multiple times, it's going to be a game plan offense. So I feel better about the adaptability just because I think they're wired between what D'Amico saw last year and the way Kayley, I think, has just been raised up. Versatility matters, or adaptability matters. And also, McVay he adapted his scheme after they got destroyed offensively by the Patriots in the Super Bowl. He started changing, and he wanted a veteran, smart quarterback who do a lot more at the line of scrimmage. I know there's the article about by DJ Bieneme out today, where at least 1 or 2 unnamed players complained about CJ's inability to make adjustments, or he had limited ability to make adjustments at the line of scrimmage. That's going to be an interesting one. I knew that CJ had limited ability. What I was always hesitant, and I still am, I'm hesitant to criticize the offensive coordinator in some of those instances because it's not a given that a young quarterback is capable of doing all that stuff at the line of scrimmage. And that's where hopefully, and it's not a matter of intelligence because obviously CJ's smart as hell when it comes to quarterbacking. It's just a matter of reps and experience and comfort level doing it. So I tend to think it was probably Bobby just being too conservative with all of that. But without knowing for sure, I'm hesitant to always just crush a guy for not doing something that sometimes it is the players holding them back. This is an interesting one. The importance of tight ends in the run game?
Show me a really physical run game, and I'll show you really physical tight ends. And I think it starts an extension of the offensive line to control the line of scrimmage when you can affect the game in the passing game, and you can get mismatches on safeties, backers, et cetera. You can extend guys. You can get open and catch the ball with size and stature as well. Very important. That position is very important to me. And, again, I'm maybe a little bit biased, but I believe that with everything in my being.
Yeah. So immediately your mind goes to Dalton Schultz, perhaps. All right, man. If his goal is to establish the run and he wants physical tight ends, I don't know if Dalton Schultz is that guy. For what it's worth, okay, in New England, Kayley had Rob Gronkowski. He's not going to claim credit for Rob Gronkowski. Gronk is the number one prime example of, man, give me a guy who's a good receiver, but also can play like an offensive tackle. You're not going to find another guy like Gronk anytime soon. But when it comes to being a George Kittle or somebody like that, I think Cade Stover has that ability. I think Brevin Jordan is a willing blocker. He's just kind of undersized. And it's Dalton Schultz who's the huge question mark. Dalton still has value, and if other things are right, I think they can get a better version of Dalton Schultz. It's just that he's not the prime example of what you want. For what it's worth, I've said for what it's worth way too many times today. Tyler Higbee with the Rams, he was banged up and didn't play much this year, but it's not like he's a bruising physical run blocker. So I don't expect Kayley to come in and be just somehow a guy that waves his magic wand or sprinkles his pixie dust over everybody, and all of a sudden Dalton Schultz is going to be physical. But it's not like he's without worth. I think that Cade Stover, also from Ohio, like Nick Caley, which comes up here in a minute, I think Caley's going to fall in love with Cade Stover. I think Caley will be all about Cade Stover and want to get the absolute most out of him because he's got George Kittle type. Tendencies sounds weird. He's not as athletic as George Kittle, but I think he's got that same nastiness and tenacity to him. So there's something there. Last one, and this is the one that got me excited just for the phrase that he used, and it's not even in relation to football, but him talking about where he grew up in Stark County, Ohio.
That area is Stark County, Ohio. There's 20 high schools or whatever there. The fabric of that community is football, and it's blue collar. It's tough people. It's a great place. And as a kid growing up, you play football on the street, you play in your backyard, and you dream of playing in those high school stadiums.
Yeah, and the blue collar, that's what got me excited, just because Tom Coughlin once said, and it resonated with me, he basically said, you never forget that football is it's a blue collar job. And sometimes because you get to wear nice suits and you get to pretend you're like, oh, I've got an LLC set up in the off season. I'm a businessman. No, you're a skilled manual laborer. You are working in the trades, and your trade is football. And that's it at the end of the day. It's a really, really, really well-paid blue-collar job. And I think when teams or players get too far from that, that's when you start to see the guys that are underperforming or underachieving. So I love a blue collar mentality. I would buy those guys used Carhartts to wear to meetings, or Dickies, whatever you guys prefer, and and lean into that, because I think that's D'Amico Ryans. Like, that feels more like this guy is in lockstep philosophically, attitudinally, and everything else. And the book was Same as Ever by Morgan Housel. Let me, I don't know if I have that was the book, one of the books. Morgan Housel, Nick Caserio liked a lot. And I'm actually going to interview him on the YouTube channel at some point about this book. I haven't rated it or reviewed it. Morgan Housel. It's want to understand the changing world, start with what stays the same. That's the amazing conclusion of Morgan Housel's fascinating, useful, and highly entertaining book. Who's that by? Oh, just I don't know, some Harvard Business School dude. So there you go. Nick Caserio, Seth Payne, some professor from Harvard Business School who probably indirectly contributed to the Great Recession. So, just always take it with a grain of salt. But Caserio likes that author a lot. Questions. Cut Schultz and draft a tight end. Listen. Not every player on any football team anywhere is the perfect embodiment of everything you want on that team. Like, it's not like there's a team out there that's got 11 All-Pros on defense and 11 All-Pros on offense. I think one thing that I like about Kayley is talked about leaning into players' strengths. That's a very New England philosophy of like, all right, let's not worry about what this guy can't do. Let's worry about what he can do. Nick Caserio has talked about that. So that's one of the good things that I'm glad that Nick has brought from New England. And Dalton Schultz still does good things, and him having a rapport with CJ is one of them. So I'm not. And you need 3 tight ends usually, typically. So I'm cool with Schultz for this year, and we'll see. Maybe we see a different version. Yeah, I said it with like an eyebrow raise. Like, yeah, it's not really a word, but people use it. Maybe it actually is a word, but it sounds like it isn't. You know what is a word now? Oh, what's the one that people always use I'll think of it after the stream is over. Some of these words that aren't words actually become words that they, and then you get to annoy priggish people. Brevin ain't the best blocker either. Right, yeah. I mean, he's willing, but he's undersized. CJ threw 3 interceptions on the same cover 2 beater to Nico this year. The thing about all the cover 2 they were seeing was that Nico was the one that was relatively immune to it, except that I think CJ sometimes got a little too confident or a little too desperate, and he was forcing the ball at times this year. One big difference between a Slowik or a lot of the Kyle Shanahan type thinking or the Kubiak thinking is that they don't tend to really have hot routes. They think that, all right, there's an answer in the play call, depending on what you see. And when people talk about that system being antiquated, that's another thing I always get a little hesitant to, because everybody develops their own system. But I think defenses have gotten complex enough and have gotten so good at disguising and doing multiple things that it's just not as simple anymore that, okay, there's going to be an answer in the play and the quarterback's going to be able to figure it out. Quarterback, and if there's one thing, it's not audibilizing per se that I worry about. It's the fact that they just didn't even expect CJ to diagnose much pre-snap. And Bobby Slowik said this as much. There's another hallmark of that scheme. It's that, we're going to run the play. There's an answer in that play somewhere based on what coverage you see. And I just don't think it's as simple or as easy as it used to be. And the teams, like if you look at the Commanders this year, and Cliff Kingsbury had a whole lot of easy options, quick options, hot routes for Jaden Daniels when they were blitzed, and that did not look like a rookie quarterback versus the blitz. They did a much better job with that. So I'd expect to see a little bit more of something of that. Yeah. No, fleek isn't. Mathing probably is a word by now. Let's see. Use all the draft picks on O-line. Problem with that is then you've got too many rookies out there. You can't coach them all up. You can't see. I know what you're saying though. If they use the top 2 draft picks on offensive line, I wouldn't worry about it. But I'm cautiously optimistic that you're going to see a better version of Jarrett Patterson, Juice Scruggs. I just don't know about Kenyon Green. I see why they are intrigued by his upside. He, especially with his new body type this year, that's an athletic big dude. His ability to stay healthy, for one, is kind of an issue and a problem. But there's just he was so lost again this year that I'm open to the possibility. But if they pencil him in as a starter, that was one of the biggest mistakes they made this year. Just basically handing the job to him. I did not get that. I didn't understand it. I didn't think it was the right thing to do. Which NFL team did you root for as a kid? Is it weird balancing that fandom when you became a player in the league for another team? I was a Bills fan. I grew up, and back when they were bad too. All right, they didn't get really good until I was in high school. So I had to go watch Joe Ferguson play with bad, and I didn't have good winter clothes. It was freezing. It was awful. It was miserable. And I only got to go to the games where nobody wanted tickets, which was a lot back in the Joe Ferguson days. But no, it wasn't hard. The one time I had a chance one year when I was a free agent, in which I ended up re-signing with the Oh, no, this was late in my career. I went and visited the Bills, and I probably would have signed with them, but this is where I learned a little wrinkle of some bad ownership teams. Ralph Wilson, the owner, was somewhere on vacation, and they couldn't reach him. And I was coming off my second ACL in 3 or 4 years. Like I had like 3 major injuries over a 4-year period at the end of my career. So I was going to be going into my 11th year in the NFL. I was going to be a minor signing for them in the offseason to see what I still had left in the tank. And I was sitting there. I ended up sitting there for like 3 hours. They pushed my flight back, and I didn't know why. I'd like every now and then somebody would come in to talk to me. Internet service sucked, so my phone was almost useless to me. And I ended up going home without them having been offered a contract. And my agent told me later, he's like, well, Ralph Wilson has to sign off on all their signings. So it was crazy. It was crazy. It was like they were. I might as well have been Mario Williams, that the owner has to sign off on this deal or something. Like, no, it would have been close to the veteran minimum salary and not that big a deal at all. And yet they didn't even have the authority to do it. But it wasn't hard. I'm very much. I thought, go screw them. They didn't want to draft me. They're dead to me. Dead to me. Yeah, entire O-line needs to be present at OTAs and preseason. I can't remember. I don't think we usually have an issue with that, do we? I mean, Tunsil doesn't always participate in everything, and he was coming off of an surgery last year. But Tyler Booker is smart. We're right. Okay, so if you draft Booker, I mean, you're still okay. Then what are you doing with Shaq Mason? Is Booker would likely start. And that's a first-round pick that I would feel better about penciling him in right away. You still got to give him like a couple weeks in camp to show that he deserves it. But that one I'm not as – yeah, it's just that Kenyon Green now is shown that he should be under the gun. Like, he's already demonstrated that he should not be penciled in as a starter. And I'm sure that was probably a oh, okay, you're reacting to Tyler Booker reminds me of Kenyon Green. I think Booker – because Booker's kind of a mauler, but with better technique overall than Kenyon Green. Kenyon Green got away with a lot of mauling, and he got a lot of holding calls when he was in college. He was a great prospect, don't get me wrong. I think it wasn't like should the Texans have drafted Kyle Hamilton instead? Perhaps, instead of trading back and then getting Kenyon Green. 100%, yes, they should have had Kyle Hamilton. But yeah, I was okay with the pick. I think Booker is a little bit more polished. My Fenway Park Boston take this morning was awesome. Oh, are you talking about when Sean said it was fun to be a fan there? And I was like, well, yeah, as long as you're white. And immediately I thought, like, oh, Boston fans get all pissy when they hear that. But like, no, the team actually came out with a statement in 2021 about how, yeah, we've had a lot of incidents, and it's kind of an issue. So the Boston Red Sox agree with me. Okay, I'm going to cut it. I'm trying to keep these things to less than a half hour. That seems to be the sweet spot. So then I get people that have attention spans, but people aren't scared off by a 45-minute or 1-hour episode. So thank you. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the like button. Even if you don't like it and then never come back. It'll be our little secret. I don't name names, okay, everybody? And go read that.